Welcome everyone to the MEF Technical Strategy webinar. I'm Stan Hubbard, Communications and Research Director at MEF, and I'm delighted to introduce Pascal Menezes, our CTO, who will be walking us through the technical presentation today. And we certainly welcome everybody's feedback on the presentation, and we encourage you to participate in the question and answer period throughout the webinar. So please feel free to submit questions at any time, and I'll pass those along to Pascal. So over to you, Pascal.
Well, thank you, Stan. I really appreciate that. I want to welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. We're going to go over the MEF technical strategy for the MEF fiscal year 2021. I believe that runs from July to July. And we did this in 2018 also. And it was I believe it was very successful to help really align and put us all rowing the same way, all in the same boat. And I'll talk about the motivation coming up here shortly. But most importantly, the MEF is created for members, it's contributed by members, and the adoption and the success of MEF is done by members. So this strategy presentation has been originally created and collaborated by the board of directors, our MEF leadership team, which comprises most of the co-chairs of the various committees. And now over to you as members. We would love your feedback, how important this strategy is to your business and how it can intersect with your business, and how can we help you with your business with the work we're doing in MEF as members. So with that, let me just start with the agenda item. We're going to go through the idea of a digital service provider. So we all know we've come from the world of communications, but the idea of a digital service provider I'm going to cover in detail. We're going to go through what's going on in the market, I believe, and what we believe from the board and the leadership team in the digital inversion. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And then how do we address this digital inversion with our technical strategy that we're going to describe in detail. We're going to also describe some other work we believe that's important surrounding work to this technical strategy. Then how are we going to execute it in the next coming years? And finally, some other areas around LSI API framework, modeling, and tooling. So with that, I think it's really important that I would love to hear your feedback, and whether you want to do it today and questions on the chat, and Stan would interrupt me during certain parts of the sections in this presentation, I'll be happy to answer them. Or if you want to address them specifically to me at pascal@mef.net, I'd be happy to do that. And or if you would like to have a one-on-one with me, I'm happy to do that with our membership. So let's go on to the presentation. As you know, MEF's mission has been incredible. Started in 2001 with the development of carrier Ethernet. Taking Ethernet from the LAN to the carrier has been absolutely outstanding and created an $80 billion plus market and continues to grow. That foundational work that members did well back in 2001, for the last decades plus, has given us the framework, the tools, the knowledge, the insights to be very savvy to make another impact. And we're going to go through that. One of the key areas we've done is we've moved the mission from carrier Ethernet, and then 2018 we talked about a mission of multi-services and orchestrated multi-services. And today we're going to talk about really two key areas: to develop a global federation of network, cloud, and technology providers in establishing dynamic, assured, and certified services that empower enterprise digital transformation. So two key areas to take away from there. Global federation. We've done really an amazing job of thinking about, with our Sonata work we started 3 years ago, to taking and looking at the business and operational capabilities that are needed for service providers to deliver a cloud-like experience where they can go in the portal and on demand, be able to activate their services and see what's going on with their services, test their services, and so on, and to provide that in an inter-provider automation model. We've done that with carrier Ethernet. We've now delivered SDK 4 candidate release, and now we're about to release candidate 5 coming here end of July. And hats off to everybody in the Sonata team and the LSO committee to enable that and make this happen. The other thing we're doing is we're now looking at federation, and we're starting cantata work which is really an extension of Sonata facing the enterprises. And we'd like to see the cloud providers also, who are few have joined into MEF, also embrace this and deliver this automation, this federation end-to-end from enterprise through service providers to the cloud. And you'll see that we see a better together story between providers and cloud providers, service providers, to deliver a better experience to the enterprise. The other part major to this mission statement is assured services. So what do we mean by that? We mean, number one, the enterprise or subscribers really want to see application performance, not necessarily network only performance, but application performance working to their policy and objectives. They want to see this services to deliver security. As you know, security is top of mind with so much security malware and cybercrime on the rise. Security is always very important to everybody. So they expect that from this services that we deliver. And finally, we're seeing that the model of a very high-speed underlay, and I'll talk more about this, with a very agile overlay, SD-WAN, and underlay being carrier Ethernet or transports, enables this digital transformation and this digital economy to be able to thrive, because we need not only the internet, but very stable and high-speed underlays to enable very agile overlays. I'll cover this in more detail. So with that, let me continue. So as you know, a couple of years ago, we launched out MEF 3.0. I believe it's been very successful to help frame all the work we've been doing since I've started for over 4 years ago. And I believe it's really enabled us to create a landscape and a framework for everything to snap into. Number one, on the top left, we've done a brilliant job at services. We started Ethernet, we took that cookie cutter and built new cookies. We've delivered on optical transport, layer 1, specifically optical transport, IP services, and now SD-WAN services. And that's all being done by the services teams and the application committee teams. And hats off to everybody that made that happen. We're now about, after a year and a half of an investment, about to release security for SD-WAN, application protection, security for SD-WAN, MEF-88, and we're about to embark on newer journeys around zero trust and SASE, and we'll cover this more, secure access, service edge, and we'll continue to rise up the stack. On the top right, we've done an amazing job with the APIs, specifically Sonata and Legato, and now Cantata, and so I'll cover that in more detail. On the bottom left, certification, we've done a brilliant job of taking our carrier Ethernet professional certification and service vendor certification, extended that to now SD-WAN for both professional and product and services. And we also have SDN NFV for professional services. And we'll continue to evolve our certification. And finally, in our community, I think that's been really a testimonial to closing this loop with having now developer communities, proof of concepts, amazing proof of concepts at our MEF 19 event and 18 events. And I hope we'll see some more in the coming Infinity Edge series that are coming up. So with that, let me continue. So why are we doing this? One, we want to strategically align all constituents into the strategy. As I talked about, everybody getting in the same boat, rowing the same way. Our board has been very strategic and very helpful in framing this presentation. Our committees, leaderships from various committees, co-chairs have been instrumental in this presentation. And now we want you, our members, to be part of this strategy and to make sure we have it right. We want to prioritize existing projects, make sure we know what our stack rank is. Like anything, we can only have a finite amount of resources and we have to get it right. We want to align our marketing investments. We want to make sure we market the right cadence and we beat the drums the right way for the right marketing investments and programs. Finally, we also want to deliver great workshops. I believe every month we've been doing workshops, and I believe they've been very informative, helping our membership to understand what we're doing, how to engage, how to participate, and how can this work we're doing in MEF help with the MEF, with your own businesses as members. We want to continue to invest in certification, like I talked about, professional and vendor service certification. We want to do it in the right areas. Security will be the next investment we'll be going into. And finally, we want to know what are the work items we're missing to round out the story that we need to intersect the market needs and your business needs as membership. So I want to talk about the digital economy. This is the true driver, and we all know this is happening at rocket speeds, hyper speeds, and it's really being driven by digital transformation. Now, what is digital transformation? It's really the integration of digital technologies in all areas of a business, fundamentally changing how a business operates and delivers value to their customers. And it's really important that when we look at the technologies involved, it's making this digital economy and digital transformation happen. We see that the internet and the networks in general, managed networks, internet has been very instrumental to connecting the world. We see that IoT is massively on the rise with almost as many people have machines connected. We're seeing that data now is leaving the enterprise, not only residing in clouds, but we're going to reside at the edges. The emergence of the multi-access edge compute at the network edge and building edge will also house a lot of data, mainly telemetry data that will run analytics on it with AI ML engines, and that's going to be very important. We see clouds happening at massive scales for business workloads, both public and private clouds of all types of clouds, SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, you name it. And then finally, we see blockchains emerging, I'll talk about later. And then finally, security. Security is top of mind. Cybercrime is a huge business that we really want to make sure our membership delivers great service that mitigates and stops this cyber and malicious activities that are happening at enterprises worldwide. So with that, I'd like to see and understand if there's any questions before I go on and talk about digital service providers and the emergence of digital service providers. Do we have any questions? Anything you would like to share or any feedback?
No questions at this point. I just wanted to go back. You covered the certification on an earlier slide, and I just wanted to kind of recap one of our accomplishments there. We have nearly 30 MEF 3.0 certified service providers worldwide now. And that includes 25 that are MEF 3.0 carrier Ethernet and 4 that are SD-WAN. So lots of great progress on the certification front. You mentioned LSO Sonata. We have more than 50 service providers worldwide that are at various stages of evaluation, development, and adoption of LSO Sonata APIs, including 8 that are production ready now and many others looking to be production ready in the second half of this year. So that's just a couple of points building on what you said.
Thank you, Stan. That's so true and very, very important. And thank you for that reminder. So if there's no other questions, then we'll move on to the idea of a digital service provider. So as you know, with the digital economy and this digital transformation, service providers are being affected by having to do network transformation. And what we're seeing is the emergence of communication service providers becoming digital service providers. So with that, let me kind of articulate this in a better vision. So basically, as you know, more and more of the enterprises want this idea of a cloud-like experience, the ability to go on a portal and be able to provision whatever services they want. And more of these enterprises see the world as being interconnected into clouds of all sorts on the right, including the emergence of this digital services I described, AI, ML, IoT, smart cities, so on. All of that's emerging fast, and that's being pushed to the edges. And that's part of this ecosystem. And then service providers themselves are becoming cloud native, delivering that on-demand portal experience. But with that, also themselves delivering digital services on their own and building a platform for this on the edges of their networks or their buildings or in their data centers. And I'll go into more detail on this. So what's happening is, number one is many providers own a lot of building closets or edges that they can put compute, storage, and network in. Also, they have a lot of points of presence in central offices and cable head ends and hubs and so on to put compute, storage, and network in, and already have regional data centers and connections to clouds. So really at the essence, a digital service provider is number one is creating a programmable network, as we know, and SD-WAN has enabled that from a technology level. The second thing is virtualizing services, as we're seeing more and more of these digital services will be virtualized, and we'll talk more about this, and that is being driven by the technology of NFV. And then finally, the idea of automation and APIs and analytics, and that's very important to be able to have machines do all this heavy lifting, running this very complex ecosystem and removing human error from this. So that's very important, and we've been working and pioneering this idea of lifecycle service orchestration. And finally, the idea where we invested a lot so far in our Sonata work is the modernization of the business systems itself to automation and deliver a portal-like experience where from that portal or a set of enterprise-facing APIs, the digital service provider can deliver services very agile and very cost effectively and piece together the ecosystem from device to cloud service or wherever the service may reside. As you know, with COVID-19, we're seeing the rapid movement from people now working not only behind protected areas of headquarters or offices, but actually moving to their homes and moving, when post-COVID happens, some will go back to their sites and will be highly mobile. So all of this means that as a digital service provider, the idea and boundaries of where corporate walls are disappears, and wherever users go, the network and the services have to be able to deliver assured services, and that's with performance, application performance, and security. And additionally, also the idea there that all of this is done in an automated way with a self-service portal experience. So this is very critical to the digital service provider. So before I go on to the next section, and what we'll be embarking on in our work to really talk about this digital service provider and how to realize this, I want to talk about what the industry is doing in general around this. So do we have any other questions right now before I move on? Or any feedback?
We did have one question here. Where is the MEC and MEP in the network edge? The MEC/MEP in the network edge?
That's a very good question. So let me see if I can back up. So, so basically the building edge and the network edge is really where the MEC will sit, multi-access edge compute. And that's really where, the idea of where we're seeing the most innovation. And I'll get to the details of this in coming slides. Very good question. And we're having specifically around this, we have a whole theme around this. I'll talk about the network and the building edge and how compute at those edges and low latencies will enable digital services, starting with, security, SASE, and then emerging and evolving into many, many other digital services that have to do with AI, ML, IoT, and so on. So I hope that answers that question, but stay tuned. Okay, so we'll move on, if there's no other questions, to what's happening in the market. As you know, when MEF started, the idea was enterprises want a corporate WAN, and they want to connect all their sites together and go to a data center. We know that was the past. It was well-defined, static, and it was very finite in nature that basically we knew where the boundaries were, where the walls were, and how to secure that. And basically that's how network was defined. And since then, we're now seeing a very different world emerge. It's not just COVID that created this, it's been happening for the last probably 5 years or more. And the idea there is that users can be anywhere, and there's no protection of the idea of a corporate boundaries or walls to protect the user from security postures and issues, or performance objectives should still be accomplished regardless of whether in their corporate walls or behind the corporate walls or wherever they go. So that's one. Number two, the idea of where they go to is everywhere. They're going to public clouds, private clouds, the internet, to edge clouds, edge computing, as we just discussed, and whether it be at the building edges for factory automation or at the network edges for various kind of AI, ML, or IoT kind of large big, massive IoT areas of video analytics and so on, it doesn't really matter, or autonomous self-driving cars. All of this means that the network has to be fluid, very user-centric, and it has to have the ability to be very programmable and very agile in nature. And there is really no finite network edges anymore. It's infinite where it can go, the network itself. And so this is really the nature. So what we've done in MEF is we've looked at this trend with the digital service provider model that we just talked about. And we're looking at to address it in the upcoming years of the projects we'll be doing. So I'm going to get into the details of this. And the first thing I want to talk about are three major themes to address the digital inversion I just discussed and to become digital service providers. One is the idea of underlays and overlay services. And I'll go into details here and I'll verbalize this because I don't have slides that I can readily show up, but I can more than happily have one-on-one discussions with you if you'd like to. The second one is enable the edge. Now this is the multi-access edge compute that could sit in the building or at the points of presence in cities or central offices, as I discussed. And we'll talk more about that in detail. And the idea is that all of this has to be secured. And that I think we'll talk a lot in detail also. So number one is we've been on the journey since I've started 4+ years ago of climbing the stack up from Ethernet, brilliantly executed Ethernet, carry Ethernet, and moving up the stack to IP services, which we built upon SD-WAN on IP, using those IP services, and executed extremely well on that as owning the standard organization for SD-WAN. And now we're moving up the stack to security, as I'll talk about. And further, we see our eyes on the emergence of true digital services like IoT, and I'll cover that in detail in coming slides. And we'll hopefully continue to climb up the stack. So this climbing up the stack involves more revenue for our members and delivering and clarifying standardization so we can make sure the enterprise know what they're buying and make sure they get the behavior they want from this fluid temporal networks that we just described. The other thing we're seeing is that in this underlay overlay model of services, the underlay matters. Having a Ferrari on a dirt road doesn't mean the Ferrari is going to do much. You might as well have a horse and buggy. But having a Ferrari on a very super high speed highway makes a big difference. So underlays are important, and the massive investments of our membership, of our service providers who've built those super massive highways, have already interconnected themselves in the data plane level to ENNIs, through ENNIs. Now to Sonata, we're now enabling that automation to turn up any point in the globe to any point of the globe in really sub-second or sub-minutes, hopefully seconds. And that's a really powerful, important aspect of our theme and our strategy. So the idea of connecting, the underlay is already connected to carry Ethernet, and that's been going on for a decade plus. Now automating that connection from a commercial level so that you can you can look at an address, get a price, quote on it, order it, troubleshoot it, test it, all those kind of scenarios we're talking Sonata can do. And we're very proud of our work, Sonata. So a very high-speed underlay is a big takeaway, very important for all the overlays to happen. Now, with the overlays, we've really done a brilliant job with SD-WAN, starting with MEF-CECP. Now 70.1 version 2 is coming out shortly. Really brilliant work from all the members that participate in that work. And we are now seeing use cases emerge for the home, and we're seeing vendors, SD-WAN vendors, deliver on SD-WAN for the home. SD-WAN for 5G will become very important. I'll cover that. The idea of SD branches are emerging, which is really an SD-WAN with a branch focus versus a WAN focus. And then the idea of private 5G coming in for industrial commercial sites, and that will be also intersecting with SD-WAN. So some really important use cases that we'll be addressing with our SD-WAN work emerging, and I'll talk more about that. And finally, with all our SD-WAN, like we've done with our Sonata APIs from a commercial level, we're seeing more and more of a digital service provider having multiple SD-WAN vendors that they were supporting for various reasons of price points or feature sets. And they want to plug those SD-WAN vendors into their service provider orchestration systems and business systems. And the idea of having automation APIs to do that removes a lot of that integration cost that they have to do with each vendor. So that's important. So with that, the next part of the theme is enable the edge, the multi-access edge compute edge. And this is building or network edge. And with that, we are started an incubation group that's getting a lot of traction. And we've seen some big cloud guys join in on the idea of a universal edge. And this is truly now not talking about service definitions of how SD-WAN should behave. This is defining minimal interop standards for the data plane, control plane, and management plane, because that's needed when providers have thousands of edges of POPs that they want to put multiple vendors into. The idea of having to support 4 or 5 vendors in each POP becomes enormously expensive and hard to operate. And additionally, the SaaS providers, the software as a service providers that are worldwide want to plug in with SD-WAN also, and they need something of a standard to plug into. And so we see those major use cases very important, and that work is incubated now and will be going into a project proposal at the end of this month at our virtual members meeting coming at the end of July. And I hope you attend that session and vote for it in. The other one is that's very important is taking all our Sonata work, and with the edge emerging from the edge, can we take our Sonata and take the exact same APIs and just change the product offering, meaning instead of carrier Ethernet, be IP MPLS, or IP broadband, or 5G, and be able to use the same Sonata APIs and orchestrate those underlays on demand to all those access providers worldwide. So a very powerful use case, taking Sonata and applying it from the edges of the POPs or central offices or the head ends, and then orchestrating in various underlays from different access providers outside of the footprint of the digital service provider. And finally, we see that enterprises want a better together story of service providers and cloud providers coming together as the digital service provider slide I showed you, coming into the enterprise and delivering a seamless end-to-end experience. Cloud complexity is enormous. Service provider complexity is also difficult and challenging. And understanding the food chain end-to-end is complex and challenging for an enterprise. And so a better together story is already being emerged with a lot of cloud providers and service providers coming together in partnership and going in their enterprise together. So that's very important. And finally, the last major theme is secure at SASE. But before we get to SASE, let me talk about our work that has led to the SASE work. We spent 1.5 years on our SD-WAN work, MEF-88, which has taken and extended MEF-70 and 70.1 and defined the idea of zones. And now we can apply security zones, and more importantly, describe security functions and what the behaviors of functions are. So now we have in MEF-88 the definitions of security functions, how they should behave, and what's the SD-WAN policy to invoke that function. It doesn't matter where that policy, where that function lives, and we'll talk about it in a second. It can live at the customer prem, it could live at the service provider edges, it could live at the hyperscale cloud side at the regions. It really doesn't matter. The idea is that the functions are defined through an SD-WAN policy and they're distributed accordingly where they need to fit. And that distribution is done through this idea of automation for virtualized services. So the first idea we're seeing is, and there's some incubation work happening, and we'll talk more about this with NFV, is the idea of orchestrating the idea of virtual functions that can live anywhere, as I described, edges, sites, or hyperscale clouds, and invoking the security functions for our securing the work. And that would lead to the work of SASE, which I'll talk about in a second. And finally, if we're going to have this idea for secure access service edge, so think about SASE is SD-WAN, a lightweight SD-WAN edge at the customer site that funnels traffic to a service provider's edge, be a building edge or a service provider network edge. And then within that edge, having all the security functions needed to deliver on security objectives. And there we're looking at, to do that, the idea of zero trust, the idea that before you access that edges and access to the clouds or anywhere in this digital service provider's network, you have to supply identity, whether it be user identity, device identity, application identity, or all the above, will then define where the application flows can go. And that will be all defined by access control done by the self-provisioning portal by the subscriber or the IT subscriber, enterprise subscriber, IT Pro. And finally, defining SASE. Proud to say the SASE team has released the white paper as of yesterday, and you can see it on our website, and we'll be making a lot of noise about this. And there's an incubation group that started from the white paper to define a project around SASE, which takes all our SD-WAN work, our MEF-CECP work, our API work, our zero trust work, and define that all into a SASE framework and define further service definitions and objectives and attributes. So as you can see, these three major themes, we're doing a lot of projects to enable these three themes to meet the infinite edge, as I just showed you before, and the digital inversion that I just described, and enable our service providers, our membership, to become digital service providers. So before I go on, are there any questions or thoughts or feedback? I'd love to hear your ideas or feedback.
So Pascal, maybe this is a good time to mention, you touched on the workshops earlier, mentioned the 3 workshops that we have completed over the last several months. We had the SD-WAN security and SASE workshop that's now on demand. The tools for inter-provider service automation that deals with the LSO Sonata and the implementation experience, that's on demand as well. And then all things SD-WAN, which goes into MEF 70.1 and everything else that's happening there, including certification. So lots of great material that the team has worked on, members and Pascal and others have worked on. So check out our on-demand workshops.
Thank you, Stan. That's absolutely brilliant and so true. Our workshops has been outstanding and really a great source of information to help our membership meet their business needs through the work of MEF. So thank you. So before I go to the next step, I'd like to say that we're going to get into execution. Before we do, there's some additional work landscapes we believe are important, and I'll just touch upon briefly. And these will have slides because they're a little more complex to understand than the standard work we've been doing the other 3 themes. One is we see the idea of our Sonata and Cantata API work meeting blockchain, and we see that yes, today we have networks that are connected at the ENI level, and we're enabling that with Sonata and Cantata for automation at the business level and commercial level. But now we're seeing that more and more networks will be using distributed ledger technology and compute nodes, installing them to doing various functionality up here, which is basically having non-repudiation audit trails, smart contracts and digital settlements, and fraud mitigation. So all these will be enabled through DLT technology, while we at MEF have been enabling the APIs, and together APIs and DLT will deliver a federation model as our mission has talked about, and deliver the business function that covers all the use cases from pre-ordering, ordering, trouble taking, so on, to then finally all the other DLT areas. So we see that's very important. Additionally, if you stay tuned and you come to our session tomorrow at 8 o'clock Pacific, maybe Stan can talk more about this. We have kind of a workshop, more of a members review of our security for securing our APIs, specifically Sonata APIs, and doing that through a federated service. We'll talk more about this to help our members to ease the idea of securing APIs, which are very, very critical because of the business nature. So that's very important, and I hope you can join us on that. And then finally, we've been doing work on supply chains, MEF 114, around blockchains to being on demand. Think of it as smart contract or supply chains to turn up supply chains very fast on demand, and enabling all of this work of APIs and DLT to deliver both connectivity services and digital services, and then on-demand services that we've yet to do or describe. So that's real important. The next big area is NFV orchestration. As you know, Etsy NFV and Etsy MEC has been doing orchestration for 5+ years or more. And while it's great work, no knocking on the Etsy work, we do see the need that we need simplified orchestration wherever virtualized functions live, and specifically today security or SD-WAN functions, where they live at the branch or the edge, the network edge, or the data center, the ability and importance to have this single idea of a service orchestration, and to do that in a much more leaner, more agile way. So there's a project underway currently that's been incubated called Lean NFV, and that will go into a project proposal at the end of July in our members meeting also. Hope you can attend that. Very interesting work on how Lean NFV is seeing this project proposal. The group Lean NFV is seeing to solve this problem of a single way of orchestrating from branch to edge to data center with one single orchestrator model. The other area is slicing. With all our work happening and with 5G emerging fast, one of the powers of a true 5G core and a 5G radio access network is the ability to have slicing. And we're taking all the slicing concepts for 5G and applying it from end-to-end slicing. So we have a project called MEF-CECP that's going, I believe, into second letter ballot, and then we'll go into second call for comment, and I think then go into a letter ballot by the end of the year, is the idea of taking and defining an end-to-end slice, and we're calling it a network slice as a service. And basically that network slice today can abstract out all the underlying technologies besides just 5G, all the other technologies that slice has to traverse. So think about an end-to-end network slice that's starting right from the customer prem, going through a 5G network or a broadband access network, through the core network of Ethernet or IP/MPLS or optical, and all of that is being defined and abstracted away, and all the enterprise user or the enterprise subscriber buys is end-to-end slice with a sets of uni endpoints, and then it has on it different price slice profiles of objectives. Now today we're thinking more of performance objectives, but there's nothing as a slice having security objectives added to that. And the goal is, how can we take SD-WAN where a customer or a subscriber supplies what their objective is, application objectives, whether it be performance or security, and then how can that be realized automatically in an end-to-end slice model. So MEF-CECP, I urge you to get involved with that project. Very powerful project. We're reusing a lot of the GSMA 3GPP concept around 5G to then redescribe end-to-end slicing, and also doing slicing for other areas around shared radio front hauls. So I'll talk about that in a second. Our 5G projects we've been working on is extending MEF 3.0, specifically SD-WAN over 5G, and specifically over fixed wireless access. We know today there are many fiber in the grounds all over, but sometimes it just doesn't get to the building, and that last mile can't be covered. It's a real problem area in many parts of the world, and extending that with 5G fixed wireless access is very powerful. And we want to make sure that SD-WAN coupled with fixed wireless access for 5G with that high-speed local loop enables a very great programmable overlay on top of a very high-speed dependable underlay. So we're doing work on that, as I talked about in that slicing project and other areas. We're also seeing 5G with carrier Ethernet being very important. We already have released, I believe, our front haul work, about to be released, our front haul work, enabling the same carrier Ethernet performance objectives we've done for backhaul, because front haul has such stricter requirements and performance objectives, describing those performance using carrier Ethernet in the front haul. And then also taking our MEF-84 project and describing slicing from sharing front hauls with multiple mobile operators. So that's also MEF-84. That work's also happening and is also included in MEF-84 for end-to-end slicing and this idea of shared front haul. And I talked about our end-to-end slicing in MEF-84 for 5G already. And then finally, we see Sonata having the ability, though nothing has happened today, to taking our IP services work, adding a 5G uni to it, and then taking our Sonata APIs and not changing the APIs, just adding a new product payload, which I'll show you coming up slides here, to having then orchestrating 5G local loops. So think of a fixed wireless operator or any operator can go by and orchestrate and get instantly on demand a 5G local loop on a fixed wireless access nature, and then run overlays on top of that as part of our underlay overlay theme. Sorry, let me go back. Then on the IoT, we've not started any work here, but this is truly moving up the stack, and probably in calendar 2021, I hope to see some incubation work here. We know, and there's been a lot of acquisitions in this area, we know today that many enterprises are suffering from understanding what IoT devices are sitting in the enterprises within their corporate boundaries and even in their homes. When a worker goes to homes, they're all points of attacks. And they're very vulnerable because they're IoT devices. They don't have the same hardening as some of the managed devices. And there are many types of device types. And the idea is with SD-WAN, can we identify these types of devices at the building edges or small site edges or even home edges and understand what are these IoT devices, what are the vulnerabilities, and then putting them into security zones as MEF-CECP and MEF-CECP talks about, and securing them and reducing that vulnerability and making sure that they're not hacked, and having a backdoor into the enterprise or the home is very important. So this is work I think is very, very powerful. No work started on that, but I hope we get to do some work on that. And you as members, I hope you see value in this and might want to incubate some areas in this area. And finally, cloud services. As our Better Together story, we have work active together that describes a framework, much of what MEF-55 did for LSO. We're describing how service providers and cloud providers of all types can go together the enterprise and deliver that in a cloud architecture and have reference points so that we can understand how to make this all work from an automation level. So this is very powerful. I hope you get involved in that too. So with that, we're about to move to the execution side, and I know we've been spending a lot of time, and thank you for your patience. I'd love to hear your thoughts up to this point before we get to execution. Do you have any thoughts or any feedback? Again, this is your membership. This is your strategy. It really is important that you are part of the strategy.
So Pascal, one of the questions that we get often is, what's the collaboration look like with MEF and service providers and the cloud players? How's that working?
So we see that, especially now with the edges emerging, it's really powerful that you're seeing all the announcements that cloud providers want to put their bits at the edges, whether it be a 5G edge or a building edge or a network edge of a POP or a central office or a head end. That's a very powerful story, and that reduces latency, and it's very important. And there are a lot of cloud providers now partnering with service providers in a Better Together story around that low latency for digital services. And if you think about inference of an AI ML engine, of just ability to infer at very low latencies, if we look at when we do and text someone, we just speak into texting someone, that inference is not happening on our phone, it's happening on the network. And so converting that natural language into written text is happening through an inference of an AI ML engine. So that's just a simple use case, but there are many use cases in industrial robots and so on where you need very, very low latencies, and cloud providers that are providing some of these applications, whether it be function as a service or platform as a service, whatever, it doesn't matter, wants to enable that at the edges of the service providers. So that's one big theme that's happening, and that is being driven by the edge. The other big theme is that the enterprise is seeing a lot of friction of all the moving parts between all the multi-clouds. So think of a hybrid multi-cloud is what most enterprises are doing. Multiple cloud providers, they're connecting to the internet and their own data centers, private clouds, and they have their own data stored in a hybrid way. So that complexity needs to be solved between the service provider and the cloud providers working together, going in the enterprise to help remove that complexity. So that's the other big area we're seeing service providers and cloud providers working together. Okay. All right. So now we have 15 minutes, so let me move to the execution. So as you know, I've covered major areas of our themes, our strategy from a technical project levels, and by no means do I want to disrespect other projects I didn't mention. They're just as important, but with the limited amount of time I have and the amount of slides I have, we can only pick certain strategic areas, but all the projects that's happening in MEF are important. So I thank you all. So in execution, I want to say we've really done a brilliant job in basically moving up the stack, starting with Carrier Ethernet being the golden goose. And from there, we've been delivering tremendous value moving up the stack with SD-WAN, landscape. We've captured it as the standard organization. Brilliance on that to the team, kudos to the team. And now moving to security and hopefully moving up the stack further into IoT and so on. So from a static level, our service work from the committees, application committees, service committees, we've done a really brilliant job of doing that work, defining attributes, service definitions, behavior, so on, very, very powerful. And then our LSO committee has done an amazing job at the Sonata, the business layer, BSS layer, and then down to the LSO layer with Legato, and done a brilliant job in really tackling that alligator down, or cutting the beast down, you know, if you think about it, just basically getting that under control and wrestling that down and getting a plan. And now we're again talking about Sonata release candidate SDK5 coming out, which will have payloads described for carrier Ethernet for interoperability that can expand those payloads. I'll talk about it in second year, I mean, like payloads, and not change the APIs out for other products. So think about Sonata can support all these various MEF services without changing the APIs, and that includes Legato, that includes Cantata, if it gets adopting the Sonata approach, and it becomes very powerful. Presto, even though we did work on that initially, we haven't evolved that work, so the leadership felt that we shouldn't check that box yet because we haven't evolved it. So for prioritization level, we've been focusing on the business layer, BSS layer, getting that right, down to the orchestration layer, LSO layer, Legato, and then we'll continue focusing as we get traction in those areas down to the Presto layer and below, okay? The other area is meet for speed. Everybody, the world's changing rapidly. The world, within 2 years, you blink and the world's changed. And 2 years really is literally light speed. And we at MEF have to be also very conscious of speed. However, MEF is known for incredible quality. Whatever we produce in the $80 billion market of carrier Ethernet has been quality. The SD-WAN work has been quality. And it's done through tremendous collaboration, and consensus slows us down. That's just the way it is. And we have to manage many work items, and putting that all together and piecing that puzzles together to create the bigger picture, very important. And we need dedicated SMEs to make this all work. And with our SD-WAN work and our Ethernet work and our IP work, all our SMEs really helped us in delivering tremendous quality. Now, important to that quality, we also have to have MEF accelerators. We have to increase the engagement. We have to get more people involved. That means we have to understand, what is your commitment from an organization? How can we intersect your business objectives with the MEF work we're doing? How can we create the foundational layer for you to leverage as a business within your membership, with your business as a member? How can you leverage the MEF membership and the work to then build your own intellectual property, your own differentiation on, and not have to invent everything from scratch? And so that's kind of what we've been hoping as members you do, and secure and commit to some more work and get involved more. We need to also minimize our work into chunking it down into targeted scopes, and we call that minimal viable products in the agile world, and we all know how to do that, so that's important. We need to enhance our collaboration tools. We want to be able to, between conference calls, be able to join, whether it be email distribution list or persistent chats. It doesn't matter. We need to enable that in MEF for our membership. And then when we get to calls, we shouldn't really have to do much in calls except go over the preparation for the week of the contributions and really debate the issues. And that's kind of how we can move faster. Some ideas and areas of how we can move faster. We also want to avoid surprises. We want to make sure we have early consensus on our incubation projects. We want to identify the issues and the work items. And you're seeing we've changed ad hocs to calling incubation groups. And incubation groups are encouraged to really socialize the right half here, get broader socialization, get people interested, understand the issues, what is the scope, narrow the scope, get traction, get something out fast, and then reiterate. So these are all important aspects of what we talk about avoid surprises. We also want to make sure new editors are trained, new people driving incubation are trained, and understanding our processes and rules and procedures. And also, more importantly, making sure there's no surprises when they go to launch the project as a proposal. It gets voted in because they've done all the heavy lifting up front. So think of it as being an incubation. The other part is increasing engagement. We really see that member engagement increases our speed and quality because more people, more time from our members helps. And so we want to incent companies. We want to make sure when we release specs, now your names, key contributors, SMEs, editors, your names are on those specs to the public. So everybody can see and recognize you as a thought leader. We want to recognize the companies that you represent as thought leadership and make sure you're recognized in those specs and give you awards for that. We want different kinds of people. We would want, even though we have tremendous technical people and software architects for our APIs, we need the business people. We need the product management to make sure the things we're doing the right ways. We're doing the right things to intersect the market right. We need senior execs at our membership to help influence, layers of management underneath and within their organization to participate or get certified. And we also need the service provider community to help influence the ecosystem, their vendors, to participate, to get certified, and to deliver a quality product, out through our standards to the enterprises as an offering, a service offering. Finally, for adoption, that is the key goal of why we're doing all of this, as we did with Carrier Ethernet, 80 billion plus market. That is truly successful adoption. We want to see SD-WAN the same way, and that's certainly trajectory. The trajectory is up and going towards very great adoption. We want to make sure our security work gets there, and any other future work also gets adopted. And certification is very important, both professional and service vendor. And we also need to make sure we have members of product management and commercial teams into our committees. And we've created a new committee called a commercial and business committee. So we can have these higher level senior product management commercial teams that understand the business problems at hand to participate, to direct us and steer the work. So that's very important. So given the time, I can't spend all of this, but I hope you read this and give your thoughts and feedback on this. And finally, before I leave to the last closing section, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the execution. Do you have any questions?
So Pascal, just a couple of comments and a question. One question is, is there any detailed information about the MEF 3.0 POC program? And I'll answer that. We will have details on the POC program. We're moving towards a program that will run throughout the year, a virtual POC program that is being led by our VP for Strategic Programs, Daniel Barlev. So that information will be coming very shortly. Another comment is you talked about the contributions. We'll be having Excellence in Leadership and Contribution Awards announced at our annual meeting on Monday during the plenary, Monday the 27th of July. And then also just one little comment. You mentioned SME, Subject Matter Expert. SME stands for Subject Matter Expert. That's it.
Okay, great. Any other questions or feedback from our membership? Because this is your strategy. Okay, so we've got 9 minutes left. Let me conclude here. I'll walk you through a little bit of technical, our framework of modeling and tooling for APIs. What we've done really, I think, really brilliant is leverage other standard organizations' API work. So for decade plus, TM Forum has been working and has a lot of traction with their TM Forum APIs in service provider communities. We've leveraged all that work, and I won't go into the details, but we've leveraged all those API works, and they have hundreds of APIs that we can use. And all we do is basically we've added on product level models or schemas, if you want to think of a different schema than the envelope schema, which is the API schema. And together, blended together, they represent the full API. So you can literally change products, enough products of Ethernet, SD-WAN, 5G, IP broadband for Sonata or Cantata or Legato, and any of that stuff can change here, but not affect the API itself. So very powerful construct, leveraging and working with the TM Forum. We've just concluded a lot of work with TM Forum in alignment to them. We've done a great work in aligning with them, and we're using their tooling. We've done a lot of work to fix, and not fix, I would say to evolve their APIs, where now they have a domain context specialization. So while the envelope side was kind of loose in certain areas that didn't have context to our areas that we're trying to do in Sonata, we've now had this idea of domain context specialization that's around MEF specific for the envelope side of this. And then specifically, we've in MEF have evolved our own payloads using our own ideas of attributes from our specs. And then together we blend that all together with tooling, and we create our own API that is in a file format that most developers use, and we'll talk about in a second. And that's called OAS, that's Open API Specification. And we're doing that in 3.0. So we have blending tools to do that. And at the end of the day, we deliver an SDK that is a MEF SDK. That's a blending of all of this together. That's very easy to use from a developer point of view, that they're used to understanding in a REST model, REST JSON model, and specifically around Cantata, Legato, and Sonata, and then basically certifying that. So certification will be happening on these APIs and coming up shortly as we mature them and get them to full letter ballot state. Okay, so that's a little bit of technical, but bear with me. Just think about leveraging TM Forum's work, creating new product payloads from MEF's service definitions, and together blending that all together to deliver on APIs, which are SDKs. So we're implementing better collaboration tools, as I talked about. We have using now the API tool development from TM Forum for that envelope side, and the payload side, we're using it also. And then we've created our own blending tool with contribution from our member, Martis, to put that into our SDK. And now we can blend out the full API crafted. So you don't see this envelope and payload anymore. You just do a full schema. So the other area we were talking about is like that blending tool is an OpenAI 3.0 format. We also are seeing that while we're doing these specifications and all these attributes, it'd be nice to also not only put that in a specification, but also put it in a very consumable way for APIs in this kind of payload schema generator. So think of all the attributes that will have sit in the payload of that Sonata payload or Legato payload or so on, that is a little more friendlier from an API developer. So nothing more than moving more friendly for API developers. We also want our membership as they're developing to our Sonata, as Stan talked about 50 plus service providers developing to that, we want to develop a conformance development tool testing tool that they can test against just before they go to certification. So as they're doing development, they want to test their APIs, they can run that against this conformance development testing tool kit. And then additionally, we know APIs have to be secure. So we want to be able to provide that as a service from MEF to provide that in a federation model. So if you attend tomorrow's call at 8 o'clock, we'll go through the technicality and get your feedback on that. And it's truly the most modern way of how you secure APIs across different autonomies, in a federated model. Okay. And then before I get into the summary, and we have a few minutes left, 4 minutes, is there any questions? And I'll get to the summary.
No more questions. I just had one question for you, Pascal, which is, what's the next step here for the technical strategy?
Yeah, so the next steps is really basically, let me just say here, the next steps is really, we need you to participate. You know, if participation is just getting certified, great. The participation is joining the commercial business committees because you just want to, you know, give your point of view from a business aspect, participate that way. If you want to participate in the technical frameworks of APIs or services, participate that way. It's really, we're trying to intersect your business needs with what we're doing at MEF, and they should be intersecting. And most members I talk to at the executive levels, when I tell them what we're doing, there's a lot of projects they see that is relevant with the MEF work. And we want to make sure that our MEF work is relevant to your business needs, and you can leverage that work as a member. That's very important. So that's important. And then I think the other one is basically just getting involved in projects that really you might see as important in your own groups, divisions, or on your own, objectives. So that's kind of what I see. And again, this strategy is very important. It's not a strategy baked by the board and a top-down strategy by me. It's a collaboration between the board, the co-chairs, the committees, myself, the staff, and now you, the members. We all have to be in the same boat, rowing the same way. So if you have feedback, if you want to influence this, please get a hold of me, pascal@mef.net, and I'd be happy to take that feedback and incorporate it in this presentation. At the end of this, end of July's virtual meeting, the board will basically get together and bless it. And that will be our strategy for the next 2 years and so on to execute against that. So if you have interest in influencing this, please do so. If you want me to do one-on-one with you with your corporation and company, I'm happy to do that also, pascal@mef.net. I do that all the time. It's my job to help you as members. So I hope that answers some questions. Stan, I know we're probably got 1 minute left. Do you have some questions I can answer?
No, that's it for me.
Okay, so are there no Q&As from the members?
Oh, there is one that just came in about the API security. The architecture is based on DLT or traditional certification. So
the API security is based upon JSON Web Tokens using OAuth 2 as the mechanism with OpenID Connect. If you attend tomorrow's call at 8 o'clock, and maybe Stan, if you can resend that out to everybody for the call, that'd be appreciated. Look for your email. And it's at 8 o'clock Pacific, and we're going to go through the details of how we see federating security for APIs, specifically Sonata, and how we do that in a federation model. So not a pairwise, but a truly federation many model using modern API security technologies around API gateways, security gateways, and JSON Web Tokens. So Stan, would you be able to send that out to the membership again, please?
Well, we provided the link to the attendees here.
Okay, great. So yeah. I'm happy to see you tomorrow. I know it's early for the Asian community, but we're very late actually, early in the morning. But if you could attend, that'd be awesome. Is there another Q&A? I'm happy to stay on a little longer if you need to, but it's 7 o'clock.
Here's a question. Can you run one for the Asia Pacific time zone? The LSO API security discussion?
Absolutely, we can. We'll have to set up for another date, but absolutely, we'd love to do that.
Okay.
Okay. So Stan, maybe you can take that as an action item and we can tee that up.
Okay.
Yep.
Will do.
And again, I want to sincerely thank you so much for your time, your valuable 1 hour time to be part of this technical strategy. This is your MEF. This is your strategy. I encourage you and urge you to get involved and make this a win-win for your business, your company, and the larger industry at whole. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on your time zone.
Thank you very much.